So my son's name is Collin. Something that I remember about him is just how big he was. So we had our first son, Benjamin, in 2017, and he was very small by comparison. So he was born under 7 pounds, and Colin was born over 8 pounds. So I just remember how different that he looked from my other son. He was chubby. He had thick, dark hair. He had my nose. He had my lips. And he had Stephanie's toes. I remember we were looking at his feet and definitely noted that he had my wife's toes.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a podcast where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Lee Red, and on this episode, Sam is telling the story of his son, Collin, who was stillborn at 39 weeks due to a cord accident. As a word of caution to our listeners, this story contains emotional triggers of stillbirth and infant loss. Please keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy and seek help if needed. Also be aware that these birth stories may differ from his or her partner's, as these accounts are told from their own perspective through the lens of trauma, heartache, and the passage of time. Please respect our moms and dads who are brave and gracious to share their children with us. Sam, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
Hobbies, what you do, what you like, whatever.
So for hobbies, I mean, I've been skiing since I was a small child. It's something that I did every winter, every chance I could growing up. I was on the ski team in high school. I enjoyed that a lot. These days, it's harder to get the time to go out, especially living in Rhode Island. There isn't really mountains too close to us, but and then with a 2-year-old, it's a little bit more difficult. But I try to get out as much as I can, and then in my spare time, I like to play guitar. So I've been playing guitar since high school, and I use it really as like therapeutic, just something to kind of exercise my mind and creative side as much as I can. So nothing like playing out professionally or anything like that, but just something that I enjoy personally.
Well, wonderful.
And I try to again do that as much as I can. But with a 2-year-old, the free time is less and less, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Yes, children take up quite a bit of time of your life. Do you ever make it out to Utah to ski? I'm a huge skier. I love to ski as well, so come out to Utah and I'll give you a personal tour if you need.
I've heard Utah is excellent. My brother went out there and loved it. And as far west as I've been is Colorado. So we used to go to Breckenridge growing up a few times, and then I went out to visit a buddy a couple of years back and did a few mountains out there again. So certainly a big difference skiing out west than it is on the east. So something I hope to do, further down the line.
Well, Utah has, I don't know how we got this this state motto, but I'm pretty sure it's just propaganda. But it says the greatest snow on earth. So, and I'm bad. I haven't skied outside of Utah, but I think Utah has some pretty good ski.
I would agree.
Snow.
Everything I've heard, I don't think you need to travel, especially not east. East tends to be a little bit more icy.
I know, but if you get back east, you got everything else to go along with the skiing. But yeah, whatever. You could hit up Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and then go skiing all within the same day, right?
That's true, and the beaches.
And the beaches. Yeah, go surf it in the Atlantic. And you said you play the guitar, like any specific type of are you like Spanish flamenco guitar, or are you just anything and everything?
Yeah, kind of everything, and more so. I mean, no designation as far as stylistic wise. It's kind of just if there's a song I want to learn, I'll pull up the music and try to figure it out, or I'll use my I'll use my ear to try to figure out certain chords and melodies and things. So no, I guess nothing like I took lessons in high school for a period of time, but it was really just something about like how to learn, the basics. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of self-taught from that perspective.
Well, I've got sausage finger, so my fingers don't fit on the fret on the board. So yeah, well, good on you, good on you. Music is just a fabulous thing in life. And then, yeah, let's get into the story of your son. You and your wife Stephanie, and you said you had an older son. You mentioned
Yeah.
you mentioned his name, and I've forgotten it. I'm sorry,
Benjamin.
Benjamin. And Colin is your second child. And let's talk about, you know,
Yeah. So my wife and I, a little bit about our family. So we had been in 2017, and we had talked about having a sibling for Ben. And we wanted to make sure that they were close enough in age where they would be close growing up.
hmm
At the time, we didn't know if we were going to have a boy or a girl, but I have a brother, so I was secretly, hoping for a boy because me and my brother are very close, and I, wanted my son to
hmm
have a brother to grow up with. So that was, something we talked about, and obviously, my wife would have been ecstatic with either a boy or a girl, just because we both deeply loved our son Benjamin, and he's really been the best from what we could have hoped for. So Colin, basically, we were talking about having a second child, and we had. So when my wife and I were discussing the possibility of having a second child, we wanted to have them close enough in age. So we were basically, when she had gotten pregnant, they were going to be 18 months apart. So we were coming to the realization of having two children under two, which we were super excited about and fully prepared for the chaos that awaited us. So my son Benjamin is very high energy, and we were super excited for the prospect of a brother that could um, play
match
with
that.
him
Yeah.
and be very close friends, and we were super ready for dealing with two kids under two, so to speak. So that was how it started. And when my wife got pregnant, I want to say around October, and the pregnancy was normal. It was very, very routine. So just as we had with Benjamin. So I'll go into a little detail
hmm
with our first son. My wife's pregnancy was fairly normal routine, other than the occasional heartburn and nausea. It was a fairly good pregnancy. So with Collin, it was very similar. It was you know first trimester a little bit more difficult. Second was completely fine, and then third, things start to slow down a little bit as the baby grows. That's when kind of more of the pregnancy actually is hard. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit
Don't
here.
don't you worry. It's it's a
So
sad subject.
at,
So.
at the third trimester, yeah, obviously that's when it's a little bit more difficult, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was fairly routine. And for Collin, I had gone to the appointments where we had ultrasounds.
hmm
So for Benjamin, I had gone every single appointment because I was a new dad and I didn't really know what was the norm and what wasn't. So I made it a point to literally go to every single one. And that was such a uh, normal routine birth, and Benjamin, it came out perfectly and everything was fine. So we thought that, we had this in the bag. I mean, here we have our second son, Collin, that my wife is currently pregnant with. and everything was just going to go smooth. Every appointment that we had gone to, the doctor said, "You guys are boring. You're perfect. He's totally fine. He's within the exact weight he needs to be." My wife was the exact, health biomarkers that she needed to be for that stage in her pregnancy. So everything was aligned, and we were given zero indication that anything was abnormal. Um, so this went on for the duration of the pregnancy, even so much so that we had an additional ultrasound very late in the pregnancy because my wife has there's heart issues in her side of the family. So as a precaution, they recommend an additional ultrasound just to make sure the heart is as it should be. So we had that, I want to say, in June or early July of the pregnancy. So within a month of his birthday, and no issues were raised at that point either. So we were completely thinking this is, this is in the bag. We're ready. We've been through this once before. Everything is perfect, and it's all about just let's make sure we got those go bags ready. Make sure we have everything planned for who's going to watch our son Benjamin if this happens in the middle of the night, etc. So that is everything kind of leading up into the night of July. So I'll take a step back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The day prior, so July 21st, we were, we needed something to do to occupy our son Ben. So it was a particularly hot day, and we didn't want to stay in the house. So we had decided to go to the beach and to enjoy, the weather and take our son to pick up. He likes to pick up shells and rocks and things. So we had done that for a short period of time, and then we had gone to grab lunch at a local seafood restaurant. I remember it being very crowded. I remember getting some food and ultimately kind of wrapping things up and taking our drive home. So it was a fairly innocuous day.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of just progressed our day moving forward. And then that night, we went to bed as usual. We put our son to bed, kissed him goodnight. And I remember being woken up around 1 a.m, and my wife said, "I'm in labor. I think this is it. I think I'm in labor right now." And so I got up, I got out of bed, and I said, "All right, let's go." And then I remember her standing up and looking at me and saying, this doesn't feel right. And I figured, okay, let's call your mother, let's get her here, and let's go to the hospital. I had done the 511 rule, and because I had been aware from my first son Benjamin, and we had followed that, and we had actually gone to the hospital with Benjamin prematurely, so they had sent us home. So I was making sure to count the contractions with Collin, and they seemed to be a little sporadic. So that's what kind of gave a red flag where my wife got a little concerned. So I said, "Let's get your mother here, and let's get down to the hospital immediately." So I remember grabbing her, and we got everything. We got the go bags. We got everything in the car. We had the baby seat in the car, and we were on our way. It couldn't have been more than a half hour from the time we woke up to the time that we were on the road.
Does your mother-in-law live close to you, or had she flown in just for this, or?
So our mother-in-law, we were lucky enough to have our mother-in-law live in the same town.
Oh, that's
so
very nice.
She was able to get to the house in a good amount of time, so we could get to the hospital as quickly as we could. So, and this is this is where things took a turn. So I remember driving to the hospital, and I remember my wife being in labor, but it was just a little different. There was some pain in her leg and some pain where she had didn't feel the same when during her pregnancy with Benjamin. So I parked right up front in the emergency room at the hospital, and we walked in, and they collected Stephanie's information, and they brought her into the room, and then they said, you know, Dad, you have to wait in the waiting room for now until we just take your wife's vitals and get everything, and then we'll come and get you. And it was at this point I remember taking out my cell phone and emailing my boss and my team and saying, tonight's the night. I'll keep you guys posted. I'll let you know. Thanks so much. Because, I would have been giving them updates on a regular basis to make them aware that I was, going to be out for a period of time. And then my world changed. I remember hearing my wife cry in the other room, and then a nurse coming out and grabbing me and saying, you need to come in here. So I'm already a little nervous, and I come into the room, and I remember a young woman with the ultrasound equipment, and she is over my wife's stomach and saying, I can't find a heartbeat. And I remember looking at the look at my wife's face, and then I knew something was wrong. It was disbelief. I didn't believe it, and I told them to try again. This is absolutely, I don't know what you're talking about. Get someone in here who knows how to use the machine. And she said she had done it 3 times. And I said, get the doctor. The doctor had came in, and it was the same result. There was no heartbeat. And I remember her looking at both my wife and I and said, I'm very sorry. I'm so sorry that this happened. And we just sat there crying, not really understanding the weight of what was just told to us, that we had ultimately lost Collin. And it was surreal. We had no prior indication that anything like this could have happened. I mean, we had the birth of our first son, Benjamin, was routine. And then every single appointment leading up with the pregnancy of Collin was totally routine and innocuous. My wife was literally told that she was boring because the case was, everything was so average and normal and routine that there was no issues. So to have something like this happen at the time of his birth was just a gut punch that I can't even describe. I remember trying to struggle with what was said, and I remember holding my wife and just really crying. And then I remember having to call my family and my parents to let them know the news, and just everyone being in shock and disbelief. So then from that point, they had to find us a room to deliver Collin. And I remember the fact that, I had this thought in my mind where, maybe the equipment was faulty, or maybe they were wrong, and just holding on to this hope that when my wife gives birth to Collin, that he's going to be totally fine, and they're going to be wrong, and everyone will be happy, and that will be it. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. They brought us up to a room that was separate from the maternity ward. And this is where things got even worse for a period of time. So it was in the middle of the night. I want to say this is around probably 2 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning at this point. And the doctor had come in, and he had said, I'm sorry, but we only have one anesthesiologist on staff and they're busy. So we don't have time to wait for an epidural.
Oh.
So you're going to need to start pushing. And I remember my wife being, it was just unfair. And I remember being so upset and hurt on her behalf, because here's this, a beautiful woman who, it was just told the worst news of her life. And now they're trying to say, oh, by the way, you're going to have no epidural and you're going to have to bear through the pain of everything, the physical pain on top of the emotional pain as well. And I just, I really, really struggled with that. And I demanded that they, get someone in there as quickly as possible, and that this should be high priority. And they agreed and understood, but it was just poor timing and circumstances. So my wife, God bless her, had held on as long as she possibly could, and waited for that anesthesiologist to get in there. And within 20 minutes, half hour, she was in the room, and thankfully she was able to get the epidural. So at that point, that's when the delivery process happened. So my wife went through and delivered Collin, and I remember thinking at this point that this, up until that moment, I was, I had this shred of hope, or this feeling that everyone's wrong, and he's going to be fine. And I remember being afraid that once he was born, that made everything real and tangible, and it was all there, and I couldn't deny it anymore. Um and I remember being very curious as to what he would look like, and would he be like Ben, would he not be like Ben? And then he was born, and I saw the doctor, I saw my wife deliver, I saw the doctor raise him up, and I did see the nuchal cord around his neck. It's an image I will never get out of my mind. It was tight around his neck, and the doctor had to cut it. But he was an absolutely beautiful, beautiful baby. He was over 8 pounds. He was chubby. He looked exactly like my wife and I. I mean, he was perfect. He really was. And we just held him, and we held him for hours and hours, and we just wept and consoled one another, and just tried to be with him for as long as we could.
When you mentioned that you thought the technician had to be wrong, and that the equipment was faulty, and that you held on to hope, I personally went through that as well. And it's one of those common threads throughout all the stories we hear, that maybe everybody was incorrect, and that glimmer of hope is just one of those things that it's cruel, because for me personally, it was cruel because I thought, my son is okay, and will give birth, and everything will be okay. And the silence after birth is just so daunting and so crushing. And yeah.
I fully agree. And it was that moment that, just brought everything, to the front. And it was that realization, and that moment that just everything just came crashing down. And everything that we had planned, everything that we had dreamed of, it felt like everything just came crashing down. And you think, you hear of things like this, and you never think that it'll happen to you. It's always someone else that lives in a different state, or a different, country or whatever, you never think that it's going to happen to you, and we certainly didn't. And then it does, and you got, it's just, it's I can't even describe, the feeling and the after, the after coming to terms with everything.
It doesn't happen anymore. That's such an old world situation. This used to happen hundreds of years ago, but it doesn't happen anymore. We have better technology. We have better medicine. Stuff like
Agree,
this
yeah.
never happens. And if it does, it's a very uncommon fluke. And it never seeped into my mind that it could have happened to me. And now it's, ever present in my thinking of birth. It's, a
Mhm.
dark thing that I'm always like, because I have friends who are pregnant right now, and I hope them and I wish them the best, but there's always something in the back of my head, and I'm like, please don't let this happen to them. The possibilities is it could happen to them, and please don't let it happen to them. Yeah,
Fully agree.
it's
And that's what makes this scenario that much more difficult. And I didn't mention it earlier, but my wife's sister was actually pregnant at the same time, and she was due to deliver in the same month. So they're very close, and the possibility of having, two sisters having babies in the same month, they were going to grow up to be best friends. They were both boys. So it was just a beautiful thing. And then to have, one of have Collin, not survive was just crushing. And I can't even imagine, the additional pain that caused my wife as well,
yeah,
and still does, because we 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 love Milo, which is her sister's baby, and but it's the fact that Collin isn't here is, it's just very difficult.
yeah, yeah,
And then I have friends that, it just, maybe it was because we had just gone through this, so it's, in the forefront of my mind, and it's all I think about. And the fact that now I'm realizing every single person that I know is pregnant. um, or it could be that every single person that I know is pregnant at that point in time. But it felt to us like everyone was having a baby, and everyone was having, you know, it was just like, it was a lot of reminders, I
yeah.
guess.
You're
Is how I'll put it.
hypersensitive to the situation. I agree. It seems like everybody, you
But
walk down the street and everybody's pregnant. Why did I pick this street? Should have picked a street where nobody was pregnant.
yeah, and I remember after the birth of my sister-in-law's baby, I remember being very nervous to go to the hospital because I didn't know how I was going to react emotionally, because, just a couple of weeks prior we had been in the same hospital and had the worst news imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when we got there and seeing that baby, it was totally different, and you just immediately have love for the child, and it's just warmth and happiness, and it was completely the opposite of what I had thought I would react, which would be very sad and upset and nervous, and it wasn't anything. So it was little things like that were very surprising, and I understood that there's certainly a difference and a line between, my situation and other people's situation. And but so I guess going back to the delivery story.
Yeah.
So after Collin was born, we stayed in the room for, I want to say, about 12 hours, and we had our family come in to meet him. I had my parents. Stephanie had her family come in. I had my brother and his wife come in, and we all held him, and we all just hugged each other and wept, and just kind of were there together as a family during a very difficult time. Um, the hardest part in my life, and I don't think anything will ever be harder moving forward, was having to walk out of that hospital room. So we were in there for just about 12 hours, and we were actually convinced by the nurses to have a photographer come in and take professional photos of Collin and us, that we were so in shock and upset and depressed that we thought, I don't want someone coming in here and taking photos. And I took some on my phone, and the nurse was adamant, and we thank her to this day that she was adamant that we had the photographer come in, because the photos are absolutely beautiful, and they're really one of the only things that we have of Collin that we can revisit on a daily basis, and shows us what he looks like, um, and just lets us know that he existed, and he's our son, and he's here, and it's something that we can just forever remember him by, and always call to, which is invaluable, really.
Yeah.
I remember having to say goodbye, and I remember just not being able to do it, and saying, I can't do this, and if my wife and I could have lived in that hospital room for the rest of our lives, we probably would have. But we had to leave, and with the help of the nurses and everyone, we eventually had left the room. And I just remember being in such shock that I didn't know how I just did that. It was like autopilot. It was just like I wasn't there. Someone else is in the driver's seat. And I remember just walking to our car and crying with my wife and saying, like, how did we just leave that room? And that's really still guilt that I carry to this day. I don't, I understand, logically, and that you have to leave at some point, but I just don't know how we did it.
Yeah. Did you have your son buried services, or did you have?
We did. So
how did you go about that?
Thankfully, we have a very close family that was there with us every step of the way, and they took the reins on the business side of the burial. So neither my wife or I was in any state of mind to be talking about purchasing burial plots and caskets and things. The thought of it makes me nauseous. I just can't even think about it. That whole aspect is just very gross, and something that I don't wish upon anyone. And luckily, there were some. I just remember. I remember being with my wife, and we were just trying to find things to do. After the day, after his birth and our loss, his loss. I remember going to the mall, and we needed to buy an outfit for our son to be buried in. And to this day, I can't walk through a Macy's with a child department in Macy's. I just can't do it. It's forever ironed in my brain, and just those surreal moments of taking a step back and realizing what you're doing. Like, why, like, you're at the store to purchase this for this reason. And it's just very, very sad. And so the funeral was very difficult, but as a silver lining, we had such an outpour of love and support from our family and our friends and our coworkers. Everyone was beyond supportive, and we had family members put together a food delivery train where everyone would make a meal and deliver it, and each day someone would drop a meal off so we wouldn't have to cook. And things like that mean the world. Really, it meant a lot to us that we we had this amount of support from everyone, and that we were loved, and that people were, with us during, this very difficult moment. So
Yeah.
it was very, very helpful to 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 have that.
You mentioned you're about 7 months out from Colin's birth. How
Yes.
how has that transition been? It's, you know, yes, the pain is always there, and we're just coming out of, at time of recording, we're just coming out of a winter coming into spring, and those are some dark months.
Hmm.
How are you doing? Are you coming to an understanding within yourself, or is it still just as bitter?
So I am coming to some level of understanding. I mean, there's days where it's very difficult and I get upset, and then there's days where I accept it and I understand it. And I will say that having been our son Benjamin has been the anchor through this all, and having him be at an age where he doesn't understand. He's, he's and I mean this when I say it, that he's the happiest kid in the world. He's always smiling. He's always in a good mood. He's super high energy, but on top of that, I mean, that the high energy and the happiness just forced us to really have to get out of bed and have to move forward and be there for him and play with him and do things on the weekends to keep him occupied. So it's been a blessing to have him and to be, to be able to kind of continue on his behalf as well. And that's really how I've, been able to move forward in the past 7 months. And then there's obviously, things like work that keep you occupied, and initially returning back to work was very difficult. There were some people that didn't know, by no fault of their own,
Mm-hmm.
and that had known that I was leaving for, because my wife was pregnant, but they didn't know what had happened. So having to return and have the constant reminders of, or awkwardness of, people saying congratulations or how's the baby, brings you right back to square one. And I was, of the mind where I knew that it was not said out of malice, that people had their best intentions when saying it. So I fully understood from that perspective, but it didn't lessen the pain. And but over time it was business as usual, and you kind of just get lost in your work. And whether that's a good thing or not, that verdict's still out. But so I guess 7 months out, I still think about it on a regular basis. But I just, it's something that we want Collin to always be remembered. We want him, to be known, and we want our family to always remember him, and I guess we want people to talk about it. And I'm not sure if that's the same for your situation, but when dealing with grief, people always assume that you don't want to talk about it because it's painful. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, and it's almost the exact opposite, where you want to talk about it because you want to remember, and you want people to remember him, and you want people to say his name, because it's not, at least for me and my wife, it's not hurtful. It's actually therapeutic, and it's helpful to hear people talk about him, and to bring him up. So just an interesting piece of information that I realized after this whole thing.
Yeah. The pain will always be there, but the joy and love we have for our children, is more than the pain will ever be. And it brings me so much happiness when somebody mentions my son. And going back to all the people who, what you were mentioning at work, the people who like, oh, congratulations on your child. How's everything going? Nobody would ever intentionally, if they knew, say something like that. And just the mercy that you have had on them just to say, they didn't mean it maliciously. It was just out of pure ignorance on their part. It's the truth, people don't want to dredge up bad feelings, and they don't want to dredge up pain and anger. And just the fact that you could say, hey, this is what has happened, and you're not holding malicious feelings towards them is big on your part. Because we don't want to have people completely then shut down and never ask us about our child. But
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's still hard. I struggle with when people ask, so maybe I struggle with the fact that if I'm not close with someone, say if I started a new role or I'm, newly introduced to someone at work or in my, personal life, and they ask a question about, how many kids do I have, or like, do I want to go into my whole story and explain to this person, or are they not that close enough to me where I feel comfortable saying, telling someone my most darkest or my darkest time in my life, or of something very personal about me. So I find myself in I know when I return to work, if someone had asked me, how many kids do you have? There had been times where I had said one, and then I remember feeling so ashamed,
a little guilty, yeah,
afterwards saying that. And that's been a struggle.
Yeah, it is a very complicated quagmire to get through. Because, yeah, like you said, like, people who you'll never speak to again, oh, how many kids do you have? Well, you don't have to tell them the whole story, but, yeah, but I always have a hard time deciding in those situations as well. Like, do I just say I have two? Or, do I not even bring up that my son had passed away and just say that I had just a daughter? And it's just a mess. Well, Sam, is there anything else you would like to talk about the birth of your son, Collin?
Just that he was how beautiful of a child he was. Really, I just want to make sure that I get that point across, where he was just a beautiful kid, and I'm so sorry for that. He's not here with us today. My wife and I love him forever, and I hope to see him someday, and I really hold on to that. So I really yeah.
I personally believe you will. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you.
I'd personally like to thank Sam for coming on the podcast and sharing with us his son, Collin. It is very fresh and new to him, but it's good to hear how he has been able to cope and deal with it. Thank you, Sam. Head over to our website, stillapartofus.com. There you can find the show notes, including a full transcript of this interview and any resources that were mentioned. There you can sign up for our short and helpful email newsletter. You can also learn how you could become a patron and support the work it takes to produce this show for just a few dollars. And lastly, you can find out how to get in touch with us if you would like to share your child's story on the show. The show was produced and edited by Winter and Lee Red. Thanks to Josh Woodward for letting us use his song, She Dreams in Blue. You could find him at joshwoodward.com. Lastly, subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. Always borrow money from a pessimist. He won't expect it back. Oscar Wilde.